Welcome to NUBIART Diary number 428 for the 30th of April, NUBIART, a different perspective on the African world. This month's album promo is Rejoice by Tony Allen and Hugh Masekela, which is out now on World Circuit Records. Rejoice is a very special collaboration between Tony Allen, the legendary drummer and co-founder of Afrobeat, and Hugh Masekela, the great flugelhorn player of South African jazz. The pair met in the 1970s when Masekela visited Fela Kuti at his shrine in Nigeria. Allen and Masekela had since talked for decades about making an album together, and this was finally achieved in 2010 when their touring schedules meant they were both in Britain at the same time. The recordings of all original compositions remained unfinished until after Masekela passed away in 2018. Tony Allen and the producer Nick Gold then finished recording and mixing the album last summer, and here is the product of the meeting of two geniuses. Tony Allen is not just the foundation of Afrobeat, but among his biggest influences is Art Blakey, leader of the Jazz Messengers, so linking with Hugh Masekela's South African jazz tradition was always going to deliver something special. Allen described the album as a South African-Nigerian swing jazz stew, with its roots firmly in Afrobeat and lyrics in English, Yoruba and Zulu. Accompanying Allen and Masekela are the new generation of jazz musicians, including bassist Tom Herbert from Acoustic Ladyland and The Invisible, and Kokoroko's Mutali Chashi, the keyboardist Joe Armon-Jones from the Ezra Collection, and Steve Williamson on tenor saxophone. Tony Allen often delivers with a light touch, confident in his ability to anchor any track he appears on. We can testify to this having seen him recently with Sheik Lo, where he barely broke sweat while dressed all in white. He was the coolest guy on the stage, yet he delivered the rhythms with full spectrum awareness, with his driving snare attacks supplemented by micro rolls. The album opens with Robber Thugs and Muggers, O Galajani, with Allen's signature Afrobeat drumming and chants accompanying Hugh's sympathetic horn playing. Next up is Agbada Bogo, a bass-led funky groove underpinning free-form jazz horns. On Coconut Jam, the hi-hat and snare keep time in one ear with the ride cymbal punctuating the beat in the other. Meanwhile, tom fills ripple across the soundstage from right to left, each strike echoing with clarity as if you were in the room. The clean mix is augmented with soulful horns, and the track leads on musically into Never, Lagos Never Gonna Be the Same. This is a mournful celebration in tribute to Fela and the impact he had on the city in which Allen and Masekela met. The refrain, Lagos Never Gonna Be the Same without Fela, Never, has Masekela singing for the memory of his friend. Slow Bones is a more laid-back track with Afrobeat drumming and the two horns delivering at full potential. Masekela takes up the vocals again with a Zulu rendition on Jabulani, Rejoice, Here Comes Tony. It is a jazz-funk slow groove with the bass to the forefront and the keyboards sounding like a xylophone. Tony Allen brings in Obama Shuffle Strut Blues with his full funky drummer Afrobeat style in Let's Fly. The album closer is appropriately titled We've Landed. Tony Allen again gives a masterclass in the Afrobeat groove, and the track has the Yoruba vocals 17, 18, 19 Bobo, Ise Lore Lofi Nsere, which translates as Your Work Begins. It's a parting message to the youth of today from two elder statesmen from the African continent who have seen not only musical but also so many political, cultural and social changes. Rejoice is also a fitting tribute to the late Masekela, being the first new recordings released since his passing. For our April media, we're going to look at the selected writings and speeches of Marcus Garvey, which is published by Dover Thrift Editions. Marcus says, "Education is not so much the school one has passed through, but the use one makes of that which he has learned." This is a portable pocket-sized book of some of the Right Honourable Marcus Messiah Garvey's most famous speeches and articles in the period between 1917 and 1925. It is not as comprehensive as Amy Jacques Garvey's Philosophy and Opinions, which was published by the Majority Press, but at around 200 pages there is enough here to ponder on if you are travelling light or if you want to give to someone as an introduction to the great man, and you should not pay more than £4 for a brand new copy. All the major themes are included here, including why Marquez set up the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, his vision of a liberated Africa, the African personality and morality, corruption and injustice inherent in the European ordered political and judicial systems, his meetings with the Ku Klux Klan to discuss non-aggression, enabling Africans to organize and prepare themselves for self-government, the setting up and sabotage of the Black Star Line, relations with other activists such as W.E.B. Du Bois and the NAACP, shadism and the hollowness of the talented 10th concept, where African fundamentalism, nationalism and communism align and diverge, the right of countries to be independent from colonial oppression, the uses and abuses of religion, Garvey's trial on trumped-up charges, and that the movement for justice is bigger than one man and so cannot be derailed. Many of the issues remain as pertinent and relevant today as they did 100 years ago, as they reflect the state of play since the 15th and 16th century, when Europe rose up to colonize the world and brainwash its inhabitants with their European worldview based on elevating the lowest instincts of humanity and suppressing the most enlightened, liberating, and cooperative aspects that had been in play for hundreds of thousands of years previously. Read on. On page 19, Marcus says, "We believe that any law or practice that tends to deprive any African of his land or the privileges of free citizenship within his country is unjust and immoral, and no native should respect any such law or practice." He continues on page 84. And what do we desire? We desire the emancipation of the entire race. We desire the freedom of our country, Africa, free from the domination of an alien race, free from exploitation, free from the pernicious influence of an alien civilization and an alien creed. Therefore, let no man, let no power on earth turn you from the sacred cause of liberty. I prefer to die at this moment rather than not to work for the freedom of Africa. If liberty is good for certain sects of humanity, it is good for all. On page 47. Up to page 123, where he goes, "The world is on fire. The whole human race has gone mad. Man has lost his reason, and now we are in for an age of ruin and destruction that will upset the efforts of the human race for the last 500 years. All this has been brought about by the drunken greed for power on the part of certain races and nations. We are in such a terrible mix-up that one would not wonder if man gets his hell right now and not hereafter. Everywhere you look and on every side you turn, you come in contact with the undermining influence of the one race against the other, the one nation against the other. It is apparent that truth, justice, love, mercy have taken their departure, and all that we have is the reign of selfishness and greed, which will ultimately be the wreck and ruin of our civilization." And then he goes on, "No portion of humanity, no group of humanity has an abiding right, an everlasting right, an eternal right to oppress other sections or portions of humanity. God never gave them the right, and if there is such a right, man arrogated it to himself, and God in all ages has been displeased with the arrogance of man. I warn those nations which believe themselves above the law of God, above the commandments of God. I warn those nations that believe themselves above human justice. You cannot ignore the laws of God. You cannot long ignore the commandments of God. You cannot long ignore human justice and exist. Your arrogance will destroy you, and I warn the races and the nations that have arrogated to themselves the right to oppress, the right to circumscribe, the right to keep down others. I warn them that the hour is coming when the oppressed will rise in their might, in their majesty, and throw off the yoke of ages. That's on page 50. And then on page 55, as for me, knowing the sufferings of my forefathers, I shall give back to Africa that liberty that she once enjoyed hundreds of years ago, before her own sons and daughters were taken from her shores and brought in chains to the Western world. Let me tell you this, that the Ku Klux Klan is really the invisible government of the United States of America, and that there are more people identified with the Klan than you think, that there is more people in sympathy with the activities of the Ku Klux Klan than you think. And then he goes on into page 124. The days of slavery are not gone forever. Slavery is threatened for every race and nation that remains weak and refuses to organize in strength for its own protection. Slavery has no day and no time. It is present when the strong race desires to oppress the weaker race. There is no superiority in the one race economically monopolizing and holding all that would tend to the sustenance of life, and thus cause unhappiness and distress to others. For our highest purpose should be to love and care for each other and share with each other the things that our Heavenly Father has placed at our common disposal. And even in this, the African is unsurpassed in that he feeds his brother and shares with him the product of his land. The idea of race superiority is questionable. Nevertheless, we must admit that from the white man's standard he is far superior to the rest of us, but that kind of superiority is too inhuman and dangerous to be permanently helpful. On page 167. And then he explains, we must canonize our own saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate to positions of fame and honor black men and women who have made their distinct contributions to our racial history. That's on page 184, where he continues, if others laugh at you, return the laughter to them. If they mimic you, return the compliment with equal force. They have no more right to dishonor, disrespect, and disregard your feeling and manhood than you have in dealing with them. Honor them when they honor you. Disrespect and disregard them when they vilely treat you. Their arrogance is but skin deep and an assumption that has no foundation in morals or in law. I repeat that God created you masters of your destiny, masters of your fate, and you can pay no higher tribute to your divine master than function as a man as he created you. And we'll just close with this one from the speech African Fundamentalism, where he says, let no one inoculate you for their own conveniences. There is no humanity before that which starts with yourself. God and nature first made us what we are, and then out of our own creative genius we make ourselves what we want to be. In your homes and everywhere possible, you must teach the higher development of science to your children, and be sure to develop a race of scientists par excellence, for in science and religion lies our only hope to withstand the evil designs of modern materialism. Marcus Garvey. Okay, let's move on to lyrics and spirits. O ye gods of the underworld, who set yourself up against me, and who resist the mighty ones, the stars which never set have led me on my way. That's from chapter 78 of the Papyrus of Ani. And we've got another Marcus Garvey quote. This time he says, all men should be free, free to work out their own salvation, free to create their own destinies, free to nationally build up themselves for the upbringing and rearing of a culture and civilization of their own. And we'll just link that to the quote from Leonard Jeffries, who said, whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, self-respect, and self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. So this poem's called Downpresser Skanking. Grooving to the rhythm of chaos, gyrating to the ecstasy of barbarity, breakdancing to maintain the profit, jumping up to deflower the moon, jiving and duck diving to continue the lie, whining and dining to impress the corrupted, exert to scandalize my name, the hop, skip and jump to rewrite history, the belly dance to announce the coming rape, gold diggers reel to consume the nature, nose rubbing to penetrate and confuse, bear huggings to instill false security, the dying fly to make kindness a weakness. You get too close to me, tracing my every movement, and war dancing in the right time. And that's from my book of Slaughter and Consumption. And just because of the times that we're in, I thought I'd give you another poem. This one's untitled. It also comes from Of Slaughter and Consumption. Something blew me out yesterday. Had to wipe the tears from my eyes. Seen a couple, a pair, a duo. A duo always makes me want to cry. Living in the rising heat haze, memories pass of bygone days. Long lost forever, the sweetest fruit has turned bitter. What was I told? What have I still to learn? Who trusts me to teach them, and who wants to discuss? When every man doeth thing just that little way different, every woman in her style, and what I want to know is, who rules the child? And both those poems coming from Of Slaughter and Consumption. If you want to contact us, it's Papyrus of Ani, African Quest, PO Box 35165, London SE5 8WU. The email is africanquest1@hotmail.com, and on Twitter we're at NUBIART Diary. And I'll just close by saying, talk sense, or it don't make sense you talk. Thanks for listening. Bye.